I'm Dr. Amaleya Goneos-Malka. Welcome to Womanity-Women in Unity, the show that celebrates women's milestone achievements in their struggle for liberation, self-emancipation, human rights, democracy, and much more. Joining us on the line today for our series on women in the judiciary is Deputy Judge President of the Free State Division of the High Court, Judge Nobulawo Mbhele. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amaleya. Thank you to your listeners as well. Thank you for this opportunity.
Judge Mbhele, you've served in various judicial and leadership roles, from Legal Aid South Africa to now the Deputy Judge President of the Free State High Court. Looking back, what defining moments shaped your journey into the judiciary?
Without getting into a lot of detail on the topic, my interest in the study and practice of law can be traced back to two very unpleasant encounters I had with the law in my life. One took place when I was approximately 6 years old, when the police would barge into our home on the farm to arrest and remove my aunts who would visit us from time to time because their presence violated the apartheid laws that restricted movement of black people. There would be random raids, often conducted during unholy hours of the night. And it was as though they had been tipped that there are visitors in that house. The police would just barge, remove them, arrest them, and it was quite a traumatic moment for us as kids. And the second encounter related to a grave and gruesome injustice that happened to my 16-year-old cousin who fell victim of gender-based violence. She was raped and murdered in a crime that was racially motivated. She was gang raped by 4 males. Though that event was deeply traumatic for my family, the Free State Division of the High Court, where I now serve as a Deputy Judge President, gave us hope when my cousin's case came before it. The court delivered justice, not just for our family, but for the black community at large. This served as a reminder to us that even in times of chaos, judges must remain steady, independent, and committed to the rule of law. It was a moment that affirmed the court's power to restore dignity and bring light where there had been none. It was a life-changing moment that gave us hope for a better tomorrow. My family did not believe that they would receive a positive outcome due to the race of the accused persons that had killed my cousin. It was these 2 key moments that propelled me to pursue my legal dream. At the time, it was a dream far-fetched and practically impossible to attain for a farm girl in my shoes whose parents' income would really have not managed to send me to university. But the road was not without challenges. Determination, faith, and support from the community where I come from made that dream a reality. And from that time, I believed that I want to be part of a system that restores dignity to those that did not have.
That's such a powerful motivation that you've shared with us, those personal instances. And I'm sure as you've traversed your career, you have seen moments where the law has been able to restore dignity.
I have on a number of occasions. There has been instances where I've had to represent people who were evicted from farms by farm owners. It is those moments where the small people who do not have a voice have someone to talk on their behalf, to say, you also are a human being. and must be treated with respect that actually made me realize that the law can change lives.
Judge Mbhele, you have shared with us some of the dynamics that led you to pursue law. And in relaying that, you've also shared that you came from a relatively disadvantaged background, but yet you still managed to attain your qualifications and rise to the position you're in today. Tell us a little bit about the academic journey and how you managed to pursue your studies, because if you don't have a qualification, you can't be a lawyer and you can't keep rising.
I must actually thank my late father and his employer as well. Maybe in not so much proud circumstances. While staying on the farm, my mom was a domestic worker. There came a time when I was doing standard 8, I believe, which is grade 10 in today's language, that my mom got sick and I had to go and stand in for her as a domestic worker during December holidays. And one day when the farmer went to collect the post from town, we used to get our post from the farmer. He stumbled over my report, what we would call my results for that year. And he asked me if he could open the envelope. I was excited. We opened the envelope, and when he looked at it, he saw that I got all A's I scored over 90 in all the subjects. And he took keen interest in me. When I was doing standard 9, which was grade 11 in matric, in June, he said, when you get your matric results, just inform me. Tell me what you would want to do. But at that point, I had my brother as well who was doing matric. My brother and I did matric at the same time, and he was older than me. With little resources that my father had put aside, he had to decide between me and my brother who has to go to university first. And when that time came, we both got our results on the same day, matric results. We had now to proceed to university. My father had to make a very difficult decision between, in a patriarchal system, my brother would have been the first to go to university. But then my father decided, no, I don't want a girl child who would roam the street. And my brother had to take a gap year that year and not go to school. Fortunately, at that same time, 2 of my brothers had started working, and one of them contributed towards my registration. And my father's employer, when he saw my results and realized that I wanted to go and study at a university that was quite far away from where we were staying in Landley on the farm. It was almost over 700 kilometers. The university was almost over, in fact, if not 800 kilometers from where we were staying. And he contributed towards my registration, and I'm grateful thereto. And from there, my brothers took over to support me for my daily upkeep, and with my father's little salary that contributed towards that. And it was only in my last year, when I was doing 4th year, that I received what we called today NSFAS. It was a government intervention or financial aid for struggling students. While I was doing my 4th year, I received that. But I do not want to take light the contribution that was made by my father's employer. In fact, fate put me at the right place. Had it not been for me having to go and work for a few days as a domestic worker, I would not have had an opportunity to get the contribution that I got from my father's employer.
What an incredible story, and one fueled by dreams and passion, and also a very enabling environment and Thankfully, your father didn't conform to patriarchal beliefs, which would have been very prominent at the time.
I'm grateful to him up to date. My late father, he remains a hero to me up to date.
Now, bringing us right up today, as Deputy Judge President of the Free State High Court, tell us what leadership in the judiciary requires, particularly in terms of having to balance judicial independence with administrative responsibilities.
Leadership in the judiciary entails way more than just managing a courtroom. As Deputy Judge President, I carry two hats. One is ensuring that the court runs smoothly on an administrative level, and the other is safeguarding judicial independence. Balancing the two means one has to be very clear about the boundaries. Administrative responsibilities like managing case roles, allocating matters, and making sure that judges have the resources they need should never interfere with the core duty of adjudicating without fear, favor, or prejudice. That's what one has to juggle with daily as the leader, in the leadership of the judiciary. You have to make sure that you still dispense justice to those that need it. At the same time, you also need to make sure that judges get all the support they need to perform and do their judicial work. Leadership in the judiciary requires listening to judges, staff, legal practitioners, and the general public. They all have different perspectives on how the system is working. So leadership means creating a space where those voices are heard, while also keeping the integrity of the court intact. Most importantly, one has to lead by example. If I expect judges to work with diligence, independence, and respect, I must reflect those same values in my day-to-day.
So would those almost encompass aspects of your leadership strategy, leading by example?
Yes, and making sure that I set clear and inspiring goals and make sure that the team rally behind the goals that have been set. And above everything, one has to be reliable, honest, and consistent while doing your job. And it doesn't end there. There are times when one has to take tough decisions, unpopular decisions. And while taking those decisions, sometimes one makes mistakes. It's very important to admit when one is wrong. And I also would like an environment where team members are allowed to own the decisions and always involve them in problem solving, so that they should own the decisions that are taken every time.
It really improves on accountability with that co-creative dynamic. Recently, you served as acting justice at the Supreme Court of Appeal. Can you tell us how the work in that environment differs to the work you do in the High Court, and what type of lessons do you take away?
I must say that serving at the Supreme Court of Appeal was both humbling and transformative for me. At High Court level, you are often the first port of call for litigants. You see people in courtrooms, sometimes nervous, sometimes angry, often just desperate for their day in court. You hear witnesses directly, you assess their credibility, and you make findings that are as much about facts as they are about law. It's a space where you see how the law touches ordinary lives in very immediate ways. You are actually in touch with people when you are at the High Court. But at the Supreme Court environment, the environment there shifts completely. You are dealing with appeals, which means you do not hear witnesses, you do not see people. You work from a record that has already been created in the other court. The focus moves from questions of fact to the rigorous application and interpretation of legal principles. It becomes less about the story of a particular case and more about how the law should be consistently understood across the country. That demands a different discipline. It demands an ability to engage deeply with legal argument, to analyze precedent carefully, and to articulate judgments in a way that provides clarity for the future. And one of the biggest lessons that I took away is the sheer weight of responsibility at appellate level. A single word or phrase in a judgment can shape how the law develops, not just for one case, but for decades to come. That's what I've learned at the Supreme Court of Appeal. And it makes you realize how important precision and clarity are, as every sentence must carry meaning and avoid confusion. Another lesson learned at the Supreme Court of Appeal was perspective. Being at the SCA showed me how important the work of the High Court really is. If the record is poor or the reasoning is unclear, the appellate court's job becomes even more difficult. It reinforced my belief that judges at every level form part of a larger system, and that excellence at first instance is actually the foundation of justice on appeal. And finally, I walked away with a renewed respect for collaboration. At the High Court, you often sit alone, but at the SCA, you sit in panels. And for the time that I had been there, I've always sat in panels of 5 people, which means you constantly test your reasoning against the minds of other experienced judges. That back and forth sharpens your thinking and reminds you that the strength of a judiciary lies in collective wisdom, not individual authority. It has helped me to understand how important collaboration and working together and teamwork is. That's what I took away from the Supreme Court of Appeal.
Those are very interesting insights, and I think that they actually apply in almost every field as key learnings, thinking about the aspects of collaboration, thinking about being tested, that your theorems amongst peers, and that everything works in synergy, that if things are done right in one area, as they move up the line, that makes the next sector easier to deal with.
Yes. It actually made me realize how important it is to align what we are doing at the High Court with what the Supreme Court of Appeal is doing to make their work even more easier. And we, in our division, we've had to, the JP has had to adopt some of the strategies in terms of the style and the guide of how judgments have to be written, just to make it easy for our judgments when they get to the Supreme Court of Appeal. And we adopted what mainly Supreme Court of Appeal is practicing.
You've had a very broad spectrum of experience, and if you can cast your mind back from role as judge to role as lawyer, I saw from your profile that you've been very, very involved in Legal Aid South Africa for a number of years, and now you chair its board. Can you share with us how access to legal representation changes the lives of vulnerable communities?
Access to legal representation is absolutely transformative, especially for vulnerable communities. Too often, people in these communities face legal problems that can have life-altering consequences. Evictions, family disputes, employment challenges, or criminal matters. Without proper legal support, these members of society are left in the dark to navigate a system that can feel intimidating and most of the time complex. Being involved with Legal Aid SA and now being the chair of its board has shown me firsthand how legal representation can level the playing field. It is not just about having a lawyer in court, it is about restoring dignity, giving people confidence that their voices matter, and ensuring that justice is not reserved for those who can afford it. When people have access to competent legal help, it can prevent minor disputes from becoming crises, can protect families from harm, and even provide opportunities for people to rebuild their lives. And another dimension is systemic. By representing marginalized communities, Legal Aid South Africa helps to highlight gaps and inequalities in the systems. It brings cases that force society to confront difficult issues and over time can influence policy and reform. On a personal level, the work is deeply rewarding. You see lives change in tangible ways, a family kept in their home, a worker treated fairly, or a young person guided through the criminal justice process with understanding and care. It is a daily reminder that the law is not just an abstract set of rules, but it's a tool for empowerment, fairness, and real social impact. Personally, that has always been the most compelling reason to commit to public interest law. And if one looks at where I have always been in touch with the community, even from the time when I was a student up until when I was working as a candidate attorney. I volunteered my services to public interest law officers and other NGOs that were in touch with the community, because my passion has always been with the most marginalized and those whose voices are not heard easily.
You seem to be involved and in touch with all of your communities, let alone thinking about justice serving individuals and marginalized people for that matter. But you're actively involved in the legal fraternity itself, from the Black Lawyers Association, the South African Women Lawyers Association, the Free State Gender Forum. And given all of your experiences in those spaces, and because we're a gender-based show, how far, in your opinion, has South Africa come in promoting gender equality in the legal profession?
How we measure gender equality in the legal profession is how many of those that enter the profession stay in the profession and are seen progressing. In fact, the statistics in South Africa will show that there are more women who enter the profession, but they disappear, most of them within the first 2 years or 3 years of them having entered the profession. Skewed briefing patterns result in us seeing less and less of women sustaining their practices beyond 5 years. I think the subject on gender equality has to be broadened even. There has to be a loud voice at every turn, because the consumers, I think the government is the biggest consumer of legal services. They are in our courts daily, but we see less and less of women legal representatives appearing in our courts. It means the support has to start from those that are in power. They should actually set an example that we have confidence in our women. We know that they can do the job. If those that have power or those that are in authority assert or affirm the status of women, everybody else would rally behind them and start supporting them. I must say there's not much done. We don't see more women coming into our courts. We only see them coming into the profession. We see them when we admit them into the legal profession because they move their applications in our courts. But we don't know where they disappear to, because there's no support out there for them.
So it's certainly a challenge that needs to be addressed on keeping women in the system.
It has to be addressed.
Thinking about interventions and on the topic of gender, but moving away slightly, and earlier in the conversation you mentioned the traumatic experience of your cousin being raped and murdered at the age of 16. Last year, the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Act was signed into law. And in layman's reading of it, it says that the Act provides a legislative framework for the National Council, establishing it as a statutory body that is responsible for providing strategic leadership on addressing gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa. Please share with us, what are some of your thoughts about this Act?
I think the Act is an important step forward. in South Africa's fight against gender-based violence and femicide. For too long, these issues have devastated communities and the response has often been fragmented. By establishing a statutory framework for the National Council, the Act gives a clear mandate, accountability and coordination in addressing gender-based violence forum at a national level. From a legal perspective, it provides on roles, responsibilities, and it helps align policies and programs across government departments and civil society. That matters because tackling gender-based violence requires more than just arrests and prosecutions. It requires prevention, awareness, and support for survivors. But beyond the technicalities, the Act sends a message that the state recognizes the severity of gender-based violence and that it is committed to addressing it systematically. It is also a reminder of the lost potential to influence social change. Laws like this do not just govern behavior, they signal values and priorities, showing communities that violence against women and girls will not be tolerated. Of course, passing legislation is only the first step. Implementation, resourcing, and monitoring will determine its real impact. For the judiciary and legal practitioners, it also raises important questions about how courts, legal aid, and enforcement agencies respond to cases under this framework. Ultimately, my hope is that this Act strengthens both legal mechanisms and societal commitment, giving survivors better protection, justice, and support. That's what I'm hoping for.
I support your hopes wholeheartedly because something has to be done to prevent the scourge of GBV and also help survivors move on with their lives in a productive way.
Yes.
Moving towards a lighter note, in August, we celebrate Women's Month, and this year's theme is building resilient economies for all, which I think has got quite an aspirational dynamic, especially when they phrase it as women leading the future of trade. Share with us some of your ideas of the theme or views.
I have always believed that women empowerment or total emancipation of women must be driven by women who understand how it feels to be marginalized. And I've always believed that women must be given an opportunity to chart their way forward. They must be in the forefront. They must be the ones that are designing strategies that would take them out of the situation where they find themselves in. And because for the longest time, we've had people deciding for women on how to run their businesses. And there had been interventions that were put in place which did not speak to the needs of women. And I still believe that for women to thrive in any form of business, it should be done in such a way that women drive the process, they decide what they want, they have a better voice, their voices are heard. They are the ones that speak louder about what they need, and that the responses that or the interventions that would be put in place should be the type of interventions that respond to what the women need and think will work for them.
And that almost talks to what you phrased earlier in the way of some of your leadership elements of having assertion from the people around you, listening to those voices and encouraging accountability.
Yes, I'm saying this because this thing, it can never be engaged in without looking at the history of the journey of all women in which they were subjugate and their fight in advancing gender equality was always never listened to. But we are now saying there should be that accountability and a way to say, women, what is it that you need? What can be done to ensure that you participate fully in economic transformation? It should no longer be a situation where the government decides that we put a group of women together and we give them funding to run project for sewing and a project for planting vegetables and all that, and there's no proper monitoring. Women must at some point be listened to, and that their voices should be heard at every turn for their future. And they must be the ones that decide what the future holds for them.
Tell us, who've been some of the important women in your life?
In my personal life, my mother is one resilient woman that I always looked up to, even as a young child. When we were growing up, my mom was raising chickens and selling eggs and chickens. At some point, she was supplying eggs to a supermarket in town because we were staying on the farm and it was about 20 kilometers away. She had to ride a bicycle to take her eggs to the supermarket almost every week. 20 kilometers, a 20-kilometer journey to a 20-kilometer journey back to deliver the eggs without fail. What I'm trying to say is she has been one hardworking person and very disciplined. She's unstoppable. When she sets her mind onto something, she does not look back. She would press forward and ensure that that all the goals that she sets for herself are achieved, and she does that elegantly with so much grace. She's my role model. But I've had women in the legal profession who actually held a torch for us. And I'm always fascinated by how the late Justice Mokgoro, paved a way for all of us. She arrived at the Concordat as the first female black judge there, the Justice of the Constitutional Court. And in the very first judgment of the Constitutional Court, State versus Makwanyane, she made a huge contribution in that judgment, that the principle of Ubuntu, which she articulated so well in that judgment, carries through from ages in one generation to the other. And it was in one important judgment that addressed right to life. And her contribution in that judgment was so important that it still reverberates even today into generations to generations. She's long after she has left that court. I think she did womanhood so proud that we cannot forget that. But I also learned after two very strong women, the president of the Supreme Court of Appeal, Justice Mulemele, the Supreme Court of Appeal, and Judge Kubushi, who were my principals. The Judge Kubushi was my direct principal. They were partners in a firm where I did my articles. Judge Kubushi taught me discipline, hard work, and that I should stand up for myself. Whenever I felt that my legs could not carry me, that my knees were weak, I could not stand up, she actually pushed me to stand up and have a voice. She taught me how important it is for me to speak for myself and own my voice and make my requests known, and everything that I desire, make it known. I still look up to those women up to date. They made an incredible contribution to the person that I am today.
Thank you for sharing the tributes and the impact of the women in your life. And lastly, as we close out today's chat or conversation. Please share a few words of inspiration you'd like to pass on to girls and women who are listening to us.
I'm saying to women and girls out there, there's nothing impossible to reach or attain. I am that example. The odds were stacked against me. There's not a single person who believed that I could make it to where I am today. The circumstances around me literally would not have allowed me to be where I am. But because I was motivated, I was determined, and I ensured that my presence is felt at every turn. I was at the right place at the right time, I must say, and here I am. And what I'm trying to say to all women is that being resilient is not about just being in a storm and standing there hoping that the storm will be over. Is moving forward while it's still raining on you. Is not standing at the same place hoping that you'll be rescued. No. And one important thing is that there's no room for us not to take opportunities when they are presented. Opportunities are so scarce. They are even more scarce when it comes to women. So once given an opportunity, do it with all your might, with all your strength, and make sure that you do it well, because there might not be a second chance for you. Whenever we get an opportunity to serve, that might be the last time, because women are not called upon many times to do things. Just prove yourself and represent, because you are representing every woman when you do something right. You are representing all of us. And one thing is that our failures are viewed with the magnifying glasses. And when men are on the other side are afforded opportunity to rise and fall as many times as they can afford to, we need to play our roles and build good ethical societies with good moral values around us. And just ensure that the community or the world is not so forgiving to women. When we make mistakes, our mistakes follow us at every turn. People will speak about our mistakes even in the next generations. So that when you get an opportunity, yes, when mistakes happen, do not sit there and think that's the end of the world. Rise and start afresh. Rise and do better with every opportunity that you get, because it is opportunities that stand between us and our success. And when you get it, move forward and succeed.
Thank you for that wonderful message. Thank you for sharing your journey with us and real insights. We really appreciate you being on the show. Happy Women's Month.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amaleya. Happy Women's Month to you too. Thank you for this opportunity.
You have been listening to Womanity-Women in Unity, and we have been talking to Deputy Judge President of the Free State Division of the High Court, Judge Nobulawo Mbhele.